Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Margaret, for the kind introduction. It's somewhat bittersweet that I'm giving my presidential address virtually, yet I think it's an absolute honor to open up the year's festivities with this message. I really want to thank Margaret and the team and congratulate them on a job well done. Despite all of the different challenges that they faced, from starting to plan the event to changing the venue from live to virtual, battling the contracts that we had with the hotels, et cetera. I mean, there was an extraordinary amount of effort this year by Margaret, our staff, as well as all the faculty to make this a success. So thank you to everybody, and thank you for this leadership, Margaret, because it's going to be a great show. So as I talk with you today, I've got 3 short stories. Of course, I could spend this whole time talking to you about the impact of COVID on our specialty, but have we not all heard about that? I mean, is that not already well established? My message today is about mentorship, and I basically have 3 short stories, if you will, that I've come across over the last number of years that I think are worthy of sharing today. So the first is a story about a medical student who was on a surgical rotation, pediatric urology. And in this rotation, it's long hours, busy rotation, great surgical experience is my understanding. And at the end of the day, while they were preparing for the following day's procedures and rounds, the attending pulled the student aside and said, "Hey, have you decided what you're going to do for your research project?" The way I understand it, the medical school had initiated a new project that all of the 3rd-year medical students were subjected to, that they needed to be completing some form of manuscript or bench research or clinical research over the following 2 years until they graduated. The medical student, not really having been exposed to research, didn't really know what to say, didn't want to go into pediatric urology, but told the attending that he'd like to think about it and he would get back to him tomorrow. The next day, the medical student and the attending decide on a topic, and 2-3 months down the road, that manuscript is done. What was fascinating was when the first meeting after they decided on the project, there was a small paperback book. I've looked this up. It's true. It's called The Elements of Style. And the mentor looked at the medical student who was puzzled, and he says, "Listen, if you're going to put forth the effort, why not take it all the way? You've got a good project. Do your literature search, choose your target journal, and let's get this thing published." The mentor and the mentee didn't have much interaction after this manuscript was complete. And yet, what very few people would have known is that this medical student goes on to publish 32 peer-reviewed manuscripts, publishes 11 book chapters, and was involved in 21 different phase 2, phase 3, or phase 4 research trials. Now, the key here is that the mentor-mentee relationship may not be long-lasting to have a longer-term impact. And that's really the story here. You can't estimate necessarily what the long-term impact of mentorship can be. Even a short impact can leave a lasting impact on the mentee. So now for story 2. So the next story involves a young phlebotomist who is attending a annual Congress in the early 2000s. There was a lot of excitement in the air, as you might imagine, with new technologies, et cetera. And this young member introduced himself to a board member and asked him, "How can you get more engaged?" Apparently, the member was excited about a lot of the different things that the society was doing. And the board member basically said, "What would you like to do?" They had a little dialogue. Shortly after the Congress was over, you have to be careful what you ask for, because this member was placed on 3 different advisory committees to the college. Now, keep in mind, at that day and age, there was a far smaller committee structure, but nonetheless, the member was excited to get engaged. And one of the committees was actually chaired by that board member. It was the Specialty Recognition Committee. He challenged the committee members to investigate what the committee could do as far as the society's relationship with the AMA. What does it take to be a recognized society? Investigation by the committee members, hundreds of phone calls to our own members, cross-referencing with the AMA database. It was identified that the society had far more than the threshold to be considered a recognized society by the AMA. The committee completed the application to the AMA, and the president at the time signed that, and it was submitted. Now, it's hard to believe that just simply having a member introduce themselves to a board member, they could get involved and engaged at such a quick level. But that particular committee and that application to the AMA led to what we have right now with regards to representation with the House of Delegates, representation with the CPT and RUC. So the difference here is that that particular board member was a mentor to the young member for many years, was a confidant, was a cheerleader, and ultimately helped develop that young member to the point that they were nominated to the AVLS board. So again, many different ways to mentor people. So now for story number 3. Well, this story is actually quite personal, because it's about a new member that I've had the fortune of mentoring over the last 14 months. Dr. Steve Samuel is a general surgeon from Louisville, Kentucky, who trained under DeBakey at Baylor, is a highly accomplished general surgeon who underwent a venous seal procedure for his left leg and couldn't believe the change in his quality of life. And it was that experience that actually had him thinking, with all the grueling issues in general surgery, what would it be like for him to actually have a regular sleep cycle, and entertained transitioning his career from a general surgeon to specializing in venous and lymphatic disorders. I'm going to read, if you will, a comment or a set of comments that Dr. Samuel has shared for you today. So please bear with me here. The doc spent 45 minutes with me after an apparently busy day. He shared he was putting a seasoned ribeye on the grill and that it was a perfect time to talk. After 45 minutes of my story, he asked, "Has anyone reached out to you from the AVLS?" When I said no, he explained that being mentors to new members is part of the AVLS way. And he shared he would be happy to help in any way that he could. That single phone call began an amazing relationship between the two of us. He was always available to answer questions ranging from equipment I needed, EMR issues, and provided templates for every visit that I do. He is available 24/7 for clinical questions, procedural advice, and to be my cheerleader. In addition to being my mentor, Dr. Schul and I have become very close friends. I've been in practice 14 months, and I'm pleased to report that the practice is doing well. All of this was due to a great mentor and great membership. So I mean, Steve is an incredible guy, okay? And Steve was hungry. And I think anybody in our society, we're so welcoming, we are so open. We accept people from people from all different backgrounds. It just didn't matter. Steve had a genuine interest to understand how he could be successful in the venous and lymphatic space. And that actually butted into what I would agree is an incredible friendship. And the mentorship actually goes two ways. It's not like I haven't faced my own challenges in the last year, and Steve's got a lot of experiences in his life. So it's turned into a real unique mentor-mentee type relationship. The point is that, you know, the idea of mentorship requires two parties. It requires a mentor and a mentee. The needs of the mentor and mentee may be quite different. And yet there's just an abundance of opportunity within our society. So I want to look to 6 different principles that the University of Washington shares when it comes to mentors and how they should view mentees. 1, value mentees as unique individuals. I think that should go without saying. There's no clones in this world, so everybody has unique characteristics and qualities. 2, you must develop mutual trust and respect. Well, at least in our country, I think we generally give each other mutual trust and respect at the outset. But nonetheless, if it's not well established, you need it to be effective as a mentor and mentee relationship. You must maintain confidentiality. There are a lot of different things that you may encounter with a mentor-mentee relationship, and it's important to maintain that trust as a true confidant. We must listen to what is being said and how it's being said. Depending upon what the issue is that is trying to be solved by the mentee, it's important to understand where they're coming from. And so to listen to not just what, but how it's being said is a critical, important feature. We should help the mentee solve his or her own problems, but not do it for him. How many times have we had our own kids and we're trying to help them, and ultimately we just do it for them? Okay, now I hate to think that's with school projects, but other things that they're trying to do around the house, sometimes you can just have it go much more quickly if you just do it yourself. But that's a real key, is that instead of solving something for the mentee, provide that backboard to ask questions and then provide advice, but don't necessarily do it for them. And lastly, the 6th one is focus on the mentee's development and resist the urge to clone. Now, when it's all said and done, it is about development, and yet you can't get development necessarily out of a short-term mentorship relationship, but it doesn't mean that you can't get impact, as demonstrated by story number 1. Story number 2 actually demonstrated quite a bit of development, where that mentor was dedicated to the mentee, and they had a true give and take type of relationship, as I understand it. But to summarize this, to see where we're at today in 2020 versus the early 2000s, I think it's astonishing. We're much bigger as a society. We are much bigger with regards to what we're able to do. And I mean, let's just think about it. Okay. Who would have thought in the early 2000s that we would have had a certification exam? Who would have thought that after say 18 years of not being recognized by anybody because we were the American College of Phlebology, but actually adopting a name change to not only be clear that we're a venous society, but also to embrace lymphedema. I believe that was a real sign of maturity of this organization. And I don't think many would have thought that would have been the course that we set forth nearly 20 years ago. When you think of other things, who'd have thought that we'd have the largest venous registry in the world? That we'd be producing meaningful manuscripts, impactful manuscripts, that we'd have dedicated writing groups, and that we'd be adding modules for pelvic vein and iliac vein and deep vein interventions. I mean, that's really telling. I mean, we didn't even have EMRs in the early 2000s of any significance. And here we are 20 years later, and we can actually level the power of an EMR to participate in a registry without adding to the work that we do on a routine day. So who would have thought 20 years ago that who would have thought 20 years ago you would have virtual reality headsets coming out of our education committee? Virtual education headsets that provided comprehensive sclerotherapy education, and an education committee that bobbed and weaved to the point that we could be so flexible to place our annual Congress in a virtual way in the format that it is right now. It's truly incredible. So what about COVID-19? Well, in 2000, I don't think we would have thought about COVID-19. In 2000, who'd have thought that our membership would have been affected like it was with COVID-19? But despite that, your membership team, including your board of directors early on, put together COVID resources for members so that you understood the best, the latest, the greatest, the best practices for practices that were still open, who to see, when to see. Your society participated in a collaborative effort with the UIP and other societies to provide recommendations for what should be seen urgently when it comes to pandemics, assuming this may happen again. Your society and your membership committee, who would have thought that they'd be putting 7 webinars together that would talk about safe practices in reopening, the risks of staying open, how to protect people with PPE, how to work with the PPP program in acquiring resources that you may need to get through the lag in services we were able to provide. Everywhere you look, our membership leadership has looked to add value to membership. Another example is the AVLS community. It is a networking ability in our website that allows members to interact with other members. It can be an interesting case. It can be an interesting clinical question. It could be a job offer. Who would have thought? Who would have thought 20 years ago that we'd have a formal advocacy committee? Formal advocacy committee. A formal advocacy committee that has an advocacy director, has representation with the AMA, CPT, and RUC, as we stated, has multiple societal relationships where we share common goals and can tackle problems together. I don't think that level of collaboration has been seen among societies in quite some time, if ever. And yet we're not even close to being done. So I think it's important to recognize that your society has long-standing expertise for leading in venous and lymphatic education. We're highly respected for delivering high-quality content. Your society is well recognized in its advocacy efforts that had we not had an advocacy department and paid attention to different things that were threatening our society and our members 2 years ago, and yes, we're not done, but the landscape of access to care has changed in the last 2 years, largely because of your society and the relationships that we've developed. And lastly, research. We've got the largest registry in the world. We are looked to by many stakeholders, including payers, for the data that we're getting out of our registry or data that we're able to show through the Improving Wisely projects. Bottom line is this society is relevant. And no matter where you look, there are mentorship opportunities. As I pass the baton to Dr. Meisner, I believe you're in great hands. If you look at this society's board of directors, I believe that this board has tremendous diversity and is a very powerful group, certainly set to take this society in the next 15, 20 years. I think we can all recognize that we can do more together versus individually. In addition, the society is loaded with mentors, all of which are willing to lend a hand to those that want to get engaged. When you think about this, Rarely do leaders simply emerge. Many with incredible potential go unnoticed as they never seek to get engaged. You have to ask yourself, are you a gifted writer? Do you have a particular procedure or talent that you think is worthwhile to share with other members? How do you want to get engaged and what's holding you back? As I sign off and close, I'm asking every member to think about how they can get engaged. We have never had such rich membership engagement as we have right now, but there's no end to what we can do with volunteerism. It's been an absolute honor serving you for the last 2 years, and I leave you in great hands. Godspeed.